Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you with the most up-to-date political, economic, and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Thursday, everybody. Just a piece of housekeeping at the beginning of the episode. Next week, I will be in Seoul, South Korea, meeting with clients. I would like to do at least one meetup while I'm there with subscribers of the show. So if you are in Seoul and you would like to come to one of these meetups, it will likely be next Saturday, not this coming Saturday, but next Saturday in the Hongdae area of Seoul. If you'd like to come, please send me an email at the channel email in the description below. Let me know a little bit about you, and if there is enough interest, we will go ahead with one or two of these meetups. I hope to see some of you in Seoul, South Korea next week. Okay, now for the episode. I never thought I would begin an episode of China Update with a story about a football game, but I guess one should never underestimate the ways in which Chinese nationalism can manifest itself. Last night, Wednesday evening, in Japan, Argentine football superstar Messi played in the second half of an exhibition game, the final in an Asian tour. The move has caused an explosion of outrage on the PRC internet and in state media, and has now become a full-blown international incident. We covered the background of the incident in yesterday's video. Messi, because of a hamstring injury, sat on the bench during an exhibition game in Hong Kong on Sunday. This initially caused boos and calls for refunds from fans at the venue, but by Tuesday, state media and local politicians escalated the episode to a full-blown incident, accusing Messi of intentionally insulting Hong Kong specifically and the Chinese generally, and demanding that he not play in Japan out of fairness. The club, Inter Miami, tried some PR work before the Japan game, saying it felt, quote, compelled to reiterate the reality of these types of sports injuries, end quote, in light of the ongoing, quote, headlines and negativity towards the different stakeholders, end quote, adding that the club, quote, would be eager to return to beautiful Hong Kong in the future should the fans be open to receiving the club again, end quote. In the statement, Messi said he wanted to participate in a future game in Hong Kong. In his own statement, Messi said he wanted to participate in a future game in Hong Kong, and it was a pity that he was stopped by an injury. Angry Chinese netizens were quick to attack the statement as not being an apology, presumably taking for granted that an apology is required. And it's not just netizens making noise. Major state media outlets in Beijing are fueling the outrage too. For example, state-run Global Times writes today, quote, on Wednesday night, Messi played for over 30 minutes in a not-so-packed stadium in Japan with seemingly high spirits, right after a statement was posted on his account on Chinese social media. His statement failed to quell the fans' anger. Many pointed out that in the Spanish language part of the statement, Messi wrote China and Hong Kong side by side, in parallel, an approach that clearly lacked respect for the Chinese fans to whom he was supposed to be apologizing. His different attitude in Japan also led many fans to question whether his actions go beyond soccer. Angry Chinese fans flooded Messi's and Miami International's shareholder David Beckham's social media accounts, accusing the events in Hong Kong of being deceitful and shameful. They left thousands of comments demanding an apology and refund, and questioned whether the incident is beyond the soccer game. End quote. What does the article mean by beyond the soccer game? One popular post with thousands of upvotes expressed, quote, it was a medical miracle that he recovered instantly as he arrived in Japan. It's hard to imagine that in 2024 there are still people so blatantly discriminating against the Chinese while making money here. End quote. Kenneth Fock, an Oxford-educated Hong Kong politician and legislative councillor for the Sports, Performing Arts and Culture, published a lengthy statement stating that, quote, the performance of Inter Miami in Japan was like rubbing salt in the wounds of Hong Kong fans, and that the matter cannot simply be left as is, end quote. The performance, which this senior politician is complaining about, includes things like Messi looking happy and in high spirits before, during and after the Japanese game. In a statement issued late on Wednesday, the Hong Kong government said fans in the city still had, quote, many questions, end quote, adding, quote, Messi played with ease in the match in Japan just 3 days after, end quote, and, quote, spending quite a long time on the pitch with some intense movement, end quote, thus accusing Messi of being disingenuous about the injury and suggesting that it was somehow a calculated insult. Yet even more incredibly, some commentators, including senior officials, have even claimed that Messi's decision to sit on the bench for an exhibition game due to concerns with an injury was actually a carefully orchestrated move to undermine Hong Kong and China, backed by America. Regina Ip, convener of the Executive Council, a high-ranking official in Hong Kong, expressed on Twitter yesterday, quote, Hong Kong people hate Messi, Inter Miami, and the black hand behind them, here referring to some sort of covert foreign influence, for the deliberate and calculated snub to Hong Kong. Messi should never be allowed to return to Hong Kong. His lies and hypocrisy are disgusting, end quote. An incredible statement, especially coming from such a senior official. Of course, all of this will have repercussions for Argentina's trip to mainland China next month, when they are expected to play friendlies against the Ivory Coast and Nigeria in the cities of Hangzhou, about an hour from Shanghai, and the capital, Beijing. Will Messi join? And what will this mean for his endorsements with PRC companies, which are fairly lucrative? And of course, state media has taken this occasion to criticize the West and its coverage of this entire episode. State-run Global Times, in a special editorial, writes today, quote, it should also be pointed out that the same Western media outlets have taken this opportunity to smear Hong Kong, claiming that it has negatively impacted Hong Kong's international image and reputation. This is nonsense. The Hong Kong Special Administrative Region government and its citizens have handled this incident with great sincerity and restraint, demonstrating a high level of civilization and openness throughout the process. End quote. Whether this last point in particular is an accurate characterization or not, I will let you, the viewer, be the judge. Next up, we move to China's international electric vehicle push. Hey everyone, if you're enjoying today's episode or getting some value from it, I have a huge favor to ask. That is to like and subscribe. I say it every episode, I know, but it really is the only way in which this channel can grow and be shown to new people. It's just 2 clicks of the mouse. So if you appreciate the many hours I put into this every day, then those 2 clicks are a huge help. And for those who want to help keep the channel financially sustainable, the channel relies primarily on subscriber support to keep going. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for the ongoing support. Next up, yesterday, Wednesday, the Ministry of Commerce, along with 8 other government departments, issued a joint opinion on, quote, supporting the healthy development of new energy vehicle trade cooperation, end quote, containing 18 measures. State media says that the purpose of the document is to, quote, actively help enterprises in the new energy vehicle NEV sector respond to foreign trade restrictions, while guiding industry associations and companies to collaborate with international counterparts, end quote. It appears that Beijing is prioritizing pushing its heavily subsidized electric vehicle industry to be a dominant global force. And as regular viewers know, German, Japanese, and US car makers have become increasingly concerned that this could well happen. Only a few weeks ago, Tesla head Elon Musk warned that without trade barriers, Chinese EVs would dominate global markets. According to new official numbers published by the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers on yesterday, sales of vehicles generally surged 47.9% year-on-year in January of this year to nearly 2.44 million units. The country's vehicle output last month increased by 51.2% year-on-year to 2.41 million units. Quote, the new energy vehicle sector maintained fast growth momentum last month. The country's new energy vehicle output reached 787,000 units, climbing 85.3% compared with the year earlier. New energy vehicle sales rose 78.8% year-on-year to 729,000 units. End quote. Total vehicle exports amounted to 443,000 units in January, an increase of 47.4% year-on-year. New energy vehicle exports rose 21.7% year-on-year last month to reach 101,000 units. But of course, as is common with state-sponsored industries, overcapacity is also rife. In the first 4 months of 2023, capacity utilization of the top 10 sellers of electric vehicles hovered above 70%. Price wars have persisted, suppressing profits. While BYD has surpassed Tesla in electric vehicle sales, it is well below its American competitor when it comes to profitability. In an article penned this week on Chinese policy on EVs, Dragonomics Messi expressed, quote, China's well-rehearsed industrial policy can be staggeringly wasteful, but still produce stunning results. The same pattern of fattening up companies with subsidies and protection and then cutting support and introducing market discipline to weed out the weak has already produced domestic and export juggernauts in steel, shipbuilding and solar panels. China's EV champions are focusing on the EU market, which is the biggest international prize since the US has effectively kept out Chinese EVs with its own protectionist measures of tariffs and origin requirements for subsidies. End quote. But of course, as we have seen, this is exactly what has sparked the EU probe into Chinese electric vehicles. When it launched its anti-subsidy probe, the European Commission said that China's share of EVs sold in the EU had risen to 8% from less than 1% in 2019 and could reach 15% by 2025. Beijing is preparing to hit back against the EU over this too, and German automakers must be feeling vulnerable. The 18th of the just mentioned 18 measures is, quote, actively and properly respond to foreign trade restriction measures, guide industry organizations and enterprises to actively engage in exchanges and cooperation with foreign counterparts and help enterprises actively respond to foreign trade restriction measures, led by the Ministry of Commerce. End quote. In a piece published today called China Offers Support to Accelerate EV Makers, Global Push, the Wall Street Journal writes that China is encouraging its electric vehicle makers to expand their overseas presence, including forging tie-ups with foreign research institutes and countries to build industrial clusters. Quote, companies are encouraged to establish research and development centers overseas and collaborate with shipping companies to integrate warehousing and logistics resources in foreign markets. The ministry said it would optimize credit support by encouraging banks to support EV supply chain companies domestically and overseas financially. Banks will also be encouraged to expand the scale of cross-border settlements in yuan, end quote. The Xia article we just quoted above observed that China's well-rehearsed industrial policy can be staggeringly wasteful, but still produce stunning results. It's worth unpacking precisely how much of this industrial policy spending is wasteful. And as usual, there is one commentator who can say it much better than I can. Quote, this also makes it an extremely powerful trade policy that leads directly to competitive manufacturing, weak domestic demand, and persistent trade surpluses. That's because while the Chinese economy may lose overall from the spending, the losses nonetheless benefit the manufacturing sector directly. As a result, this form of industrial policy represents a transfer of resources from non-manufacturing China to manufacturing China. Put another way, it represents a transfer from Chinese households to subsidize Chinese manufacturers in the same way that overspending on infrastructure, an undervalued currency, cheap capital, hukou restrictions, limited labor rights, and a weak social safety net do. This has a triple result. First, the huge extent and variation of subsidies makes Chinese manufacturing extremely competitive in international markets. Second, the extent of direct and indirect transfers from households keep domestic demand too weak to support the economy. And third, in order to externalize the cost of the subsidies and balance weak domestic demand with competitive production, China must run large trade surpluses. This also explains why it is so difficult to shift back to households to boost the role of domestic demand. To the extent that a disproportionately large manufacturing sector relies heavily on transfers from households to remain internationally competitive, any reversal of the direction of these transfers will have painful near-term effects on the economy. Beijing is eager to boost domestic demand to make the economy more productive and less vulnerable to foreign markets. But unless it is willing to accept the near-term cost of doing so, like Japan for over 3 decades, it will find it hard to make the adjustment. End quote. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Have a wonderful Thursday, and I will see you all tomorrow.